Wealth, in the Machiavellian sense, is never born from luck, talent, or bursts of brilliance. It emerges from a mind engineered to see the world not as it appears, but as it functions beneath the surface. Most people confuse wealth with accumulation, as if the mere act of gathering coin were anything more than the behavior of frightened peasants hoarding grain before winter. But the thought patterns that guarantee wealth over time are nothing like the habits of the masses. They are colder, more deliberate, more ruthless, but not in the loud, brutal way the weak imagine ruthlessness to be. Machiavellian wealth is built the way fortresses are built, stone by stone, calculation by calculation, with an understanding that what must endure cannot be constructed on sentiment or impulse. It must be forged in the realm of perception and power, where every decision tightens the noose around chaos and expands the territory of control. The first foundation of such thinking is the rejection of illusion. Most individuals navigate life through a haze of emotional fog, hopes, insecurities, projections, fantasies about success, delusions about deserving. They chase wealth as if chasing redemption, believing the possession of money will heal the wounds of a fragile identity. But the Machiavellian mind does not chase, it observes, it dissects. It understands that wealth is not the prize, it is merely the residue of a strategy executed with precision. Because the moment you believe money will complete you, you become vulnerable to anyone who controls its flow. The world is full of men who think they desire wealth, when in truth, they desire permission. Permission to feel important, to feel secure, to feel admired. These men never become wealthy. They only become predictable. True wealth begins with internal sovereignty, a mind that does not need money to feel whole, because only then can you analyze it without distortion. Only then can you treat money as an instrument rather than a cure. Only then can you wield it with detachment, shaping its direction instead of being shaped by its absence. This detachment is not apathy. It is the sharpening of a blade. It is the cultivation of a mind that sees further than the next comfort and deeper than the next reward. Such a mind notices patterns others overlook. Who controls whom, what people fear losing, where influence pools, and where complacency blooms. It understands that wealth is never random. It gravitates toward stability, clarity, and power, the way rivers flow toward the lowest point. Most people sabotage their ability to build wealth because they remain trapped in reactive thinking. They respond to opportunity the way a starving dog responds to scraps, with urgency, with desperation, with unquestioning hunger. But a Machiavellian mind never lunges. It waits long enough to see what the opportunity reveals. Desperation blinds, stillness illuminates. Wealth, like obedience, flows to the one who can hold silence while others fidget and break formation. There is a power in patience that the impulsive never learn to wield, a power in withholding action until the terrain exposes its weak points. In the realm of wealth, timing is a weapon sharper than ambition. The average man believes opportunity is short-lived. The Machiavellian understands opportunity recurs endlessly for those who know how to read the currents. And what are these currents? They are the predictable behaviors of humans who believe they are unpredictable. They are the cycles of desire, envy, greed, insecurity, and comfort that govern every market, every negotiation, every alliance. To guarantee wealth over time is not to conquer these forces, but to anticipate them. Humans are consistent in their contradictions. They betray themselves with the same patterns, generation after generation. When the masses panic, they sell. When they feel euphoric, they buy. When they feel ignored, they shout. When they feel threatened, they obey. And when they think they cannot lose, they lose everything. The Machiavellian mind does not moralize these patterns. It does not judge the sheep for acting like sheep. It simply positions itself so that every mass reaction becomes an energy source rather than a hazard. But understanding human behavior is not enough. The mind that guarantees wealth must also be strategically invisible. Visibility is the quickest path to interference. Those who parade their ambition trigger resistance. Those who expose their goals invite sabotage. Those who show their hunger for wealth attract predators who sense blood in the water. So the Machiavellian thinker moves with an economy of motion. He advances without sound, accumulates without spectacle, influences without announcing his presence. Wealth built in silence is wealth protected from miscalculation. A mind committed to long-term power knows that each display of progress costs twice as much as it yields, because admiration is a currency the powerful cannot afford to chase. Admiration creates dependency on external perception, and dependency is the enemy of sovereignty. The mind that guarantees wealth must be capable of studying itself with ruthless honesty. It must examine every fear, every impulse, every emotional reflex that threatens stability. Wealth is destroyed not by external storms, but by internal tremors. A single moment of pride, a single indulgence in vanity, a single need to prove superiority, these are the cracks through which entire fortunes collapse. Machiavelli taught that the most dangerous enemy is not the rival you can see, but the weakness you refuse to acknowledge within yourself. A wealthy mind is one that eliminates self-sabotage the way surgeons remove tumors, with precision, with finality, with an understanding that what threatens the foundation must be cut away without mercy. And beneath all of this lies a deeper principle, the recognition that time is the most obedient servant to those who can command it. Wealth accumulates for the mind that chooses consistency over excitement, structure over chaos, discipline over distraction. The masses seek shortcuts, bursts of fortune, miracles of timing. They wait for a tide that never comes because they refuse to build the riverbed that directs it. But the Machiavellian mind shapes time the way kings shaped borders, deliberately, strategically, with a vision beyond the horizon. Wealth over time is not a reward, it is a consequence of thought patterns engineered for endurance, not escape. A consequence of seeing reality without filters, without sentiment, without the need for permission. A consequence of becoming the kind of mind time bends toward, not the kind it erodes. The mind that guarantees wealth over time must understand that power does not arise from abundance, but from the ability to direct scarcity. Most people treat scarcity as an enemy. They fear it, resent it, attempt to escape it. Yet scarcity is the architect of value, the silent sculptor that shapes desire, discipline, and hierarchy. A Machiavellian mind does not run from scarcity, it uses it. It understands that everything precious becomes precious because it is limited. Attention, opportunity, resources, loyalty. Those who attempt to increase their worth by increasing their visibility misunderstand the very mechanics of value. The mind that grows wealth treats its presence like a rare commodity, appearing only when its appearance magnifies the moment, withdrawing when its absence intensifies demand. Wealth is not pursued, it is attracted through strategic rarity. This is why the wealthy mind does not exhaust itself with constant effort. Eternal motion is the behavior of slaves chained to necessity. Endless grinding signals a life built on uncertainty. Productivity addiction is merely a refined form of fear. The Machiavellian thinker does not confuse movement with advancement. He understands that most motion is camouflage for anxiety, a frantic attempt to avoid the confrontation with one's lack of direction. True wealth is built through asymmetry, identifying the leverage point that multiplies action rather than diluting it. The average person tries to win through exertion. The Machiavellian wins through positioning. A change of angle can defeat years of labor. A shift in timing can render competition irrelevant. A single insight can outvalue hundreds of hours spent imitating the industrious but ineffective. And positioning begins with an understanding of ecosystems. Every environment has a hierarchy, whether visible or concealed. To guarantee wealth, the mind must identify its ecosystem, study its players, map its dependencies, and locate its silent power centers. The masses observe the surface of markets, industries, politics, and social systems. The Machiavellian mind examines their skeletons, the hidden interests, the unspoken rules, the gatekeepers who control access, the networks that channel influence behind the curtain. It knows that wealth is rarely found in the arena itself, but in the shadows where the arena is designed. Most individuals compete for rewards the powerful no longer want. They fight for opportunities that were engineered to limit them. They climb ladders built to keep them occupied. But the Machiavellian thinker looks for leverage not in participation, but in orchestration. Influence the structure, and you influence every player trapped within it. Yet structure alone is not enough. The wealthy mind must master the emotional landscape of others, their aspirations, their blind spots, their insecurities. Humans operate through predictable emotional patterning, even when those patterns remain invisible to them. To guarantee wealth, one must be able to anticipate behavior before it materializes, to foresee reactions before they spark movement, to understand the psychological price every individual fears paying. People do not act logically. They act to preserve an identity, to avoid humiliation, to protect comfort, to maintain narratives they would rather die than abandon. A Machiavellian mind does not need to manipulate such individuals. It simply needs to position itself so their emotional momentum directs them exactly where they were always destined to go, into decisions that benefit the one who understands their motion. This is why long-term wealth is not built through conquest, but through calibration. Calibration of pressure, of distance, of information, of response. The mind must learn how to apply force without appearing to force anything. It must learn to withdraw without seeming weak, to advance without seeming aggressive, to reveal without appearing exposed. Wealth belongs to the one who can create predictable outcomes without revealing the strings. And this requires mastery of perception, not the shallow desire to look successful, but the deeper craft of shaping what others believe about your intentions, your resources, your capacity, and your priorities. If people misunderstand your motives, they become easier to guide. If they misread your ambitions, they leave your path unobstructed. When they underestimate you, they offer you openings. When they overestimate you, they avoid provoking you. Perception, in the Machiavellian mind, is not vanity, it is terrain. A wealthy mind must also understand cycles, not merely economic cycles, but psychological cycles. Humans rise, peak, decay, and repeat. Nations rise, peak, decay, and repeat. Markets rise, peak, decay, and repeat. The patterns change costumes, never character. The masses believe each era is unique because they lack historical memory, but the Machiavellian thinker recognizes that time only recycles its lessons through new disguises. To guarantee wealth over time is to track these cycles with the detachment of a strategist studying tides. When fear dominates, assets migrate. When greed dominates, discipline evaporates. When comfort dominates, collapse approaches. When chaos dominates, opportunity blooms. The ordinary mind responds to cycles emotionally. The wealthy mind responds strategically. It enters when others retreat, retreats when others celebrate, accumulates when others sleep, and observes when others panic. But above all, the thought patterns that guarantee wealth require an unshakable relationship with uncertainty. Most people seek guarantees, assurances, promises of stability. They cling to the illusion of permanence as if permanence has ever existed. Yet, uncertainty is not an adversary. It is the engine of advantage. Only within uncertainty does asymmetry emerge. Only within chaos do power vacuums appear. Only within unpredictability can strategic thinkers outmaneuver those who freeze, hesitate, or cling to outdated scripts. The Machiavellian mind welcomes uncertainty because it knows how to navigate it while others drown in it. It views volatility not as danger, but as distortion, a distortion that reveals where the weak have overextended themselves and where wealth will migrate next. Such a mind must also master solitude. Wealth requires decisions that cannot be validated by the crowd, actions that cannot be explained to the comfortable, and patience that cannot be shared with the restless. Solitude is the forge where clarity and conviction are tempered. Those who fear solitude remain trapped in the gravitational pull of groupthink, unable to cultivate the independence required for strategic vision. The wealthy mind must become its own counsel, its own fortress, its own compass. It must learn to hold direction even when surrounded by noise, to maintain inner alignment even when external signals encourage surrender. Solitude is not isolation, it is insulation, the buffer that protects one's strategy from contamination by the anxieties of others. And beneath all these layers lies the most essential principle. The wealthy mind does not merely respond to the world, it shapes it. It bends incentives, redirects outcomes, and engineers environments where its success becomes the most natural conclusion. It does not adapt to circumstances, it alters them. It does not wait for opportunity, it manufactures it. It does not hope for favorable conditions, it creates them. Wealth becomes inevitable, not through force, but through architecture. The architecture of thought so deliberate, so disciplined, so strategically aligned that time itself cannot resist compounding its results. The mind that guarantees wealth over time understands that every advantage is paid for in advance through discipline invisible to the world. Not the shallow discipline of routines and habits, the kind people broadcast for validation, but the deeper, more ruthless discipline of internal governance. The discipline to deny impulses, to silence emotional turbulence, to restrain premature movement, to wait while others rush, and to strike when others are numb from waiting. Wealth grows in the space between desire and execution, and only a mind capable of commanding itself can stretch that space long enough for wisdom to enter. The Machiavellian thinker does not ask, "What should I do?" but rather, "What outcome requires the least motion and the greatest inevitability?" The world rewards those who can extend the timeline of their patience beyond the lifespan of the crowd's attention span. But patience alone is insufficient without the counterweight of intentional aggression. Wealth does not favor the timid. Opportunities must be seized in the moment they appear, before the masses recognize them, before institutional players sanitize them, before the cautious intellectuals write papers explaining why they were obvious. The wealthy mind understands that moments of strategic aggression do not arrive on schedule. They emerge violently, without warning, and they vanish with equal speed. Hesitation is a form of self-betrayal. To delay is to dissolve the future. Yet aggression must be precise, cold, and calculated, not the impulsive violence of those intoxicated by urgency. The Machiavellian thinker knows that one well-timed move can outweigh 1,000 frantic attempts. Aggression is not frequency, it is accuracy. This interplay of patience and aggression forms the rhythm of long-term wealth, the silence of waiting interrupted by the ferocity of decisive action. Most people invert this rhythm. They act constantly and wait rarely. They chase every possibility, defend every idea, and react to every fluctuation. Their lives become symphonies of noise without melody. But the wealthy mind composes its actions like a strategist arranging troops. Every movement must serve a purpose. Every deployment must shift the balance. Noise is the enemy. Noise distracts, distorts, and drains. Silence sharpens, focuses, and strengthens. Wealth is not born from doing more. It is born from doing what bends probability in your favor. And probability bends only for those who understand the game behind the game. Every domain of wealth, finance, power, innovation, influence contains layers of hidden incentives. People act not from logic, but from the incentives that bind them. The Machiavellian thinker studies these incentives with surgical detachment. He asks, who gains from this narrative? Who is protected by this illusion? Who bleeds if this truth is revealed? Who benefits when the crowd behaves predictably? Wealth is created when one positions themselves on the right side of incentives aligned with forces stronger than individual will. Most people fight incentives. The wealthy mind rides them. To resist incentives is to fight a river. To align with them is to let the river carry you while others drown. But alignment with incentives requires the courage to abandon collective illusions. Wealth demands a mind unafraid of thinking thoughts the world considers uncomfortable. The average person seeks comfort in consensus. They would rather be wrong with the majority than right alone. Yet consensus is merely the graveyard of originality. By the time the crowd agrees, the opportunity has fossilized. To guarantee wealth, one must detach from the psychological warmth of agreement. You must learn to hold truths too cold for the average person to touch. You must be willing to see the world without the filters that make it palatable. This clarity may feel isolating, but isolation is the birthplace of independence. Still, independence must be balanced with the strategic use of alliances. No mind, regardless of brilliance, can accumulate wealth in complete solitude. But alliances must be forged, not through affection, nor through shared identity, but through aligned interests. Machiavelli understood that loyalty built on emotion dissolves under pressure, but loyalty built on mutually beneficial incentives becomes self-sustaining. The wealthy mind chooses allies the same way it chooses investments. By evaluating their durability, volatility, and potential for asymmetric return, it does not seek friends, it seeks vectors of amplification. An ally who opens a door is more valuable than a friend who offers sympathy. A single relationship can compress decades of effort into a single season if chosen wisely and leveraged precisely. However, alliances also require the mastery of reciprocity. Give too much, and you become exploited. Give too little, and alliances decay. Reciprocity is not kindness, it is currency. The wealthy mind gives strategically, not generously. It offers value that anchors others to it, creating an ecosystem where separation becomes more costly than cooperation. This is how influence compounds, by becoming indispensable to those who have their own spheres of power. The true Machiavellian does not cling to power. He circulates it, guiding its direction while allowing others to believe it remains theirs. And yet, behind all these external maneuvers lies the deepest battlefield, the internal war against self-sabotage. Wealth demands choices that contradict instinct. Instinct seeks immediacy, validation, pleasure, certainty. Wealth requires ambiguity, invisibility, delay, and discomfort. Instinct wants to be seen. Wealth thrives when it is unseen. Instinct craves emotional resolution. Wealth requires emotional neutrality. Instinct wants the world to feel fair. Wealth accepts that fairness is irrelevant. To guarantee wealth over time, the mind must become sovereign over itself. It must learn to interrupt emotional impulses before they shape behavior. It must become indifferent to praise, criticism, and misunderstanding. It must be comfortable appearing passive when it is actually calculating, appearing generous when it is actually strategic, appearing calm while constructing a future no one else can yet perceive. Most people fail, not because the world is hostile, but because they are hostile to themselves. They negotiate against their own potential. They romanticize mediocrity. They sabotage their trajectory to protect familiar identities. But a Machiavellian mind outgrows identities as easily as snakes outgrow skin. Identity is a tool, not a prison. It is chosen, worn, reshaped, and discarded as needed. The wealthy mind molds its self-image around its ambitions, rather than shaping its ambitions around its inherited self-image. It becomes whatever the pursuit of wealth demands, disciplined when necessary, invisible when strategic, aggressive when decisive, unpredictable when observed. And through this internal evolution, the mind gradually learns the rarest of abilities, the ability to think across decades, not merely to plan, but to architect, not merely to anticipate change, but to position oneself so change becomes profitable. The wealthy mind recognizes that compounding is not just a financial principle, it is a psychological one. Ideas compound. Skills compound, influence compounds, discipline compounds. Every year you maintain strategic alignment, the world must work harder to stop you. Every year you remain intentional, your trajectory tilts further beyond the reach of average minds. Wealth becomes not an event, but an inevitability, a mathematical consequence of thinking in a manner incompatible with mediocrity. The mind that guarantees wealth over time ultimately understands that power is not seized in grand moments, but accumulated quietly through an unbroken series of microscopic choices, choices so subtle that the world never notices them until the outcome becomes undeniable. Wealth is not a miracle, nor a privilege granted by fate. It is the residue of countless internal victories, the victory over distraction, the victory over impulse, the victory over the desire to be seen succeeding instead of the discipline to actually succeed. The Machiavellian thinker knows that every small decision carries the same weight as a decisive battle, because every decision shapes the architecture of the mind that will face the decisive battles. Great outcomes are simply the visible signatures of invisible preparation. This is why the wealthy mind does not waste attention. Attention is the original currency, the seed of every future conquest, the resource the weak spill freely. Wherever attention flows, life expands. Wherever it drains, potential decays. The Machiavellian mind guards its attention with the jealousy of a king guarding his heir. It does not indulge in trivial conflicts, emotional dramas, or ideological wars that serve no strategic purpose. It understands that most distractions are engineered traps, tools designed to keep people reactive, predictable, and easily shepherded. To think wealthy is to treat attention as a sovereign asset, allocating it only toward endeavors that bend reality toward your long-term vision. But attention alone is powerless, without the ability to execute quietly. True wealth requires a degree of secrecy, not because secrecy is heroic, but because exposure invites hostility, imitation, and sabotage. The wealthy mind moves in silence not out of fear, but out of mathematical necessity. Every idea prematurely revealed becomes vulnerable to dilution. Every ambition, spoken too early, becomes contaminated by the expectations, projections, and insecurities of others. Silence protects incubation. Silence allows leverage to accumulate. Silence prevents interference from those whose interests are misaligned with your assent. A Machiavellian mind does not telegraph intentions. It unveils results only when they are beyond sabotage. However, silence does not mean invisibility. Wealth requires presence, strategic presence, a presence capable of influencing rooms without uttering a word, a presence that signals strength without hostility, confidence without arrogance, direction without explanation. This presence is built not on theatrics, but on internal alignment. When the mind is coherent, when beliefs, actions, and ambitions move in unison, it emits a gravitational field that others subconsciously recognize. People gravitate toward those who radiate certainty. They avoid obstructing those who project quiet inevitability. Influence is not a performance. It is the natural byproduct of alignment. And alignment requires brutal clarity. The wealthy mind must be willing to identify its true motives, even when they contradict social ideals. Most people lie to themselves about their ambitions. They coat them in noble language to appear virtuous, or they shrink them to avoid judgment. But internal dishonesty is the toxin that corrodes potential. A Machiavellian mind admits its motives not to justify them, but to understand them. It does not sanitize ambition. It strategizes it. It does not seek moral permission. It seeks tactical coherence. When the mind is honest with itself, every action becomes sharper. When the mind is dishonest, every step becomes unstable. This clarity extends to the understanding of cost. Wealth is obtained by those who grasp that every gain demands a sacrifice. The masses want reward without price, progress without discomfort, transformation without the shedding of outdated identities. But the wealthy mind knows that every ascent requires the burial of an older version of oneself. It recognizes that the price of extraordinary outcomes is the abandonment of ordinary habits, ordinary thinking, ordinary emotional patterns. It accepts that comfort is the enemy, not the companion, of wealth. The Machiavellian thinker sees sacrifice not as suffering, but as a transaction, one that trades temporary ease for enduring advantage. Yet, even sacrifice must be calibrated. The wealthy mind does not seek hardship for its own sake. It does not martyr itself. Instead, it allocates suffering, the the way an investor allocates capital intentionally, sparingly, and only where the return justifies the cost. It suffers where growth demands suffering, not where ego demands proving something. This is the distinction between the strong and the reckless. Recklessness burns energy to appear powerful. Strategy burns energy only to become powerful. Wealth grows from the efficient distribution of one's pain. As the mind evolves into one capable of wealth, it must also master reinvention. Nothing decays faster than a static identity. The world changes, markets shift, opportunities evaporate, and those who cling to their old roles become relics buried beneath the momentum of time. The Machiavellian thinker reinvents not out of desperation, but out of foresight. Reinvention is anticipatory adaptation, the ability to step into the future before the crowd realizes the present is obsolete. The wealthy mind understands that longevity is secured not through consistency, but through metamorphosis. To guarantee wealth is to shapeshift as conditions shift, to remain unpredictable, to refuse to let the world categorize you. But the final and most critical thought pattern is this: wealth is a consequence, not a target. Those who chase wealth directly remain enslaved to it. The obsession with wealth reveals its absence. It is the mindset of the hungry, not the mindset of the powerful. The Machiavellian mind focuses instead on constructing the underlying machinery that produces wealth automatically. Leverage, positioning, discipline, silence, perception, strategy, and psychological sovereignty. Wealth flows from these foundations the way rivers flow from mountains. The mind that masters these pillars does not need to chase wealth. It becomes the source from which wealth emerges. This is why the wealthy mind feels no urgency. Urgency belongs to the desperate. True power moves slowly, precisely, and without anxiety. When the foundations are correct, the outcomes are inevitable. This slowness is not laziness. It is the calm certainty of someone who has architected their trajectory so meticulously that time itself becomes an ally. The world mistakes this calm for luck, but luck is merely the name observers give to a strategy they cannot perceive. The Machiavellian thinker does not seek validation for his calm. He simply allows the compounding to continue its quiet work. And so the mind that guarantees wealth over time becomes an entity shaped not by circumstance but by design. It abandons the trivial, rejects the reactive, masters the psychological terrain of itself and others, aligns with incentives, navigates cycles, and reinvents as needed. Over years, this mind transforms into something the average person cannot recognize, something disciplined, calculating, patient, and ultimately inevitable. Wealth ceases to be a goal and becomes a gravitational consequence pulled toward the one who has built the internal mass to attract it. In the end, the world does not reward the smartest, the loudest, the busiest, or even the most talented. It rewards the mind that has engineered itself to be impossible to stop. That is the true Machiavellian architecture of wealth. A mind constructed so deliberately, so relentlessly, and so precisely that time itself cannot escape its design.